The worst used camper van on the market today isn't the oldest one. It isn't the one with the highest mileage. In many cases, it's the van with the cleanest photos, the lowest apparent mileage, and the highest asking price. That's the one that should make you nervous. Picture a buyer, retired, financially careful, 2 years of research behind them, who finds a used Sprinter-based camper van at $87,000. Low miles, spotless interior, the seller describes it as a cream puff. The buyer drives 4 hours to see it, test drives it, and signs the same afternoon. 6 months later, they're looking at a $14,000 repair estimate. Failed diesel emission system, water damage that had been growing behind the wall panels for 2 years before the sale, a transmission throwing fault codes the previous owner had cleared before the listing went up. The seller was gone, the warranty had expired, and the retirement savings were already spent. That is not a horror story. That is Tuesday in the used campervan market. What you'll know by the end. By the end of this video, you will know which used campervans carry hidden ownership risks that never appear in listing photos. You'll know what to look for, what to ask, and, just as importantly, what a seller's response tells you before you've called a single mechanic. And you'll understand why some of the most trusted names in this industry become the most expensive mistakes in the used market. This isn't a list of bad vans. Some of these platforms are genuinely excellent when bought new, with a full warranty from a builder with a documented track record. The question isn't whether the van is good. The question is what happens to it and to the buyer's financial future after the first owner is finished with it. The van that traps more buyers than any other. The first van on this list will surprise you, because most people watching right now probably want one. The Mercedes-Benz Sprinter is the most recognized name in the campervan space. Ask 10 buyers which van they're researching, 7 or 8 will say Sprinter. That reputation didn't come from nothing. The platform is capable and well-engineered, and when bought correctly, it can serve a buyer well for years. But in the used market, the Sprinter is where the most expensive mistakes happen. And here's the thing, it usually isn't buyer carelessness that causes them. It's a specific mechanical vulnerability that the listing will never mention. Picture a retired couple, first extended trip planned for the following spring, who purchase a used Sprinter-based campervan with just over 40,000 miles. The build looks professional, the seller answers every question. 8 months later, the dashboard lights up with DEF warnings on a Tuesday morning, 2 days before they're due to leave. They assume it's a sensor. It isn't. 3 days after that, the van enters limp mode on a highway in New Mexico, 40 miles from the nearest Mercedes-certified technician. The van gets towed, the trip doesn't happen, the repair bill comes to $9,200. Here's what buyers need to understand about the Sprinter's diesel system. These vans are equipped with an exhaust aftertreatment system, a diesel particulate filter combined with a DEF injection setup that requires specific maintenance at specific intervals. When that maintenance lapses, or when the system is stressed by frequent short trips and low-speed driving, which is exactly how many camper vans are used, the components degrade. Repair costs run from $5,000 on the low end to well over $12,000 depending on what's involved. In major cities, Mercedes Sprinter specialists exist. Outside those corridors, finding a qualified technician is its own problem. That's problem one, but it isn't the biggest problem in the used Sprinter market right now. During 2020, 2021, and into 2022, campervan demand went vertical. Everyone was converting Sprinters: professional builders, weekend hobbyists, entrepreneurs who saw an opportunity and moved fast. Some of those conversions were built to a genuinely high standard. Others were clearly rushed to meet demand. Moisture barriers were missing or incorrectly installed. Electrical systems were undersized for real-world use. Water entered and stayed behind wall panels, under flooring, inside the structural framing, and the vans looked fine. The photos looked fine. The price looked reasonable. Those vans are hitting the used market right now, today. The damage is invisible until someone opens the walls, and the seller may not know it's there. If you're looking at a used Sprinter-based campervan and the seller hesitates when you ask about a professional inspection, that hesitation is your answer. But now here's what most buyers really don't expect.
Everything we just described doesn't only apply to unknown builders or budget conversions. Some of the most expensive vans in the used market carry identical risks. In some cases, they carry worse ones because the brand name gives buyers a confidence the ownership experience hasn't earned. Airstream is a very powerful name in American travel. For towable trailers, that reputation is grounded in real history in a genuine owner community. But used Airstream campervans, the Interstate, the Atlas, the motorized units built on the Mercedes Sprinter chassis, carry every risk we just described without the safety net buyers assume they're paying for. Buyers often pay a significant premium for the Airstream badge on a motorized unit. What they sometimes discover is that Airstream's dealer network, which is genuinely strong for their towable line, has limited capability when a Sprinter drivetrain starts failing. The repair path leads back to a Mercedes specialist. The badge adds to the purchase price. It adds nothing to the ownership support. That isn't a criticism of Airstream's construction quality. It's a structural reality of buying a motorized unit whose chassis belongs to an entirely different manufacturer and service ecosystem. Before paying a premium for any badge in the used campervan market, the question worth asking is, what exactly does this premium buy me when something goes wrong? The risk almost nobody talks about. The Sprinter and the Airstream are at least known risks among careful researchers, but there's a third category that flies almost completely under the radar, and it may be the most dangerous in today's used market. Ford Transit-based campervans from the 2015 to 2019 model years are everywhere in the listings right now. The Transit itself is a well-regarded workhorse. Parts availability is excellent. Ford's service network is one of the most extensive in the country. In isolation, the Transit chassis is one of the better foundations for a campervan. The problem isn't the chassis. The problem is what those years represent in the history of the conversion industry. That window was the first major wave of transit-based campervan production in North America. The builder landscape was completely fragmented. Standards were inconsistent. Some operators ran legitimate businesses with trained crews and documented processes. Others were two people in a rented warehouse who had learned their trade online and were selling the result for $65,000. Consider a first-time buyer, couple in their late 50s, first van purchase, who finds a Transit conversion with genuinely impressive interior work. Hardwood cabinetry, quality appliances, the wiring looks clean. They buy it. 14 months later, deep into a full-time travel year, the house battery starts dying overnight, intermittent, then consistent. They trace it to a parasitic drain that had been quietly running since the build. The propane system they later discovered was never pressure tested before the van left the builder. When they try to contact the company for documentation, there's no answer. The business has closed. Nobody to call, no warranty to invoke, just a problem and an invoice. The safest Transit campervans in the used market come from established builders who are still operating, who have build documentation, and who have a verifiable history with real owners. If a seller cannot tell you who converted the van, when it was built, and what process was followed, that isn't a minor gap in the paperwork. It is the most important piece of information about that vehicle.
The uncomfortable truth about the market right now. Here is what most buyers don't want to hear, and this is the section that matters most. The used campervan market right now is not the opportunity it appears to be. Prices are down from the pandemic peak. Inventory is up. On paper, that looks like a buyer's market. But what has entered that inventory is not the same as what existed before 2020. A significant portion of what's listed today represents vans that were bought at peak prices, used heavily, and are now being offloaded by owners who ran into costs they didn't anticipate, or who have simply moved on. Many of those sellers aren't being dishonest. They genuinely don't know what's wrong with the van. The problems are inside the walls, in the diagnostic history they never pulled, in the service intervals they didn't keep. And there's an irony in this market that most buyers miss entirely. Some of the lowest mileage used campervans on the market right now should raise the most questions, not the fewest. A van with 22,000 miles in 3 years of ownership wasn't driven much. That sounds reassuring, but it can also mean the diesel system was never properly cycled. The battery was chronically undercharged.
The moisture damage from a poor build had 3 full years to develop in a van that sat more than it moved. Low mileage is not a clean bill of health. Over the next few years, as more pandemic-era conversions continue entering the used market, this problem will get larger before it gets smaller. The buyers who understand that now are the ones who will protect themselves. This is the point in the buying process where a retirement dream can quietly become a long-term financial obligation, not at the negotiating table, not in the financing office, right here, in the assumption that what looks good actually is good. What to check before you sign anything? So how do you protect yourself? The process isn't complicated, but it requires discipline, and it requires knowing what experienced buyers actually look for, which is different from what sellers expect you to ask. Most buyers ask about mileage first. Experienced buyers ask for service records first. Those are two very different conversations. Ask for the complete service history, not the seller's summary of it, but the actual records. Oil changes, DEF service intervals, transmission fluid, brake service. A van with 55,000 miles in a full documented record is a fundamentally different purchase from a van with 55,000 miles in a seller who tells you it's been well looked after. Well looked after is a description. Records are evidence. A seller who immediately produces maintenance records is behaving very differently from a seller who starts talking about how little the van was driven. Pay attention to that difference. Find out who built the conversion and verify they still exist. Search the builder's name, look for owner forums, reviews, any traceable history. A builder with 5 years of operation and verifiable customer relationships is not the same as a name on a decal that returns nothing in a search. Ask where the van has been used, not what it's been used for, but where. Highway miles between cities produce a very different wear pattern than mountain passes, rough terrain, and temperature extremes. Reluctance to answer that question directly is worth noting. And hire a qualified campervan-specific inspector to look inside the walls, not a standard vehicle mechanic, someone who understands conversion quality, moisture barriers, electrical load calculations, propane system integrity, structural condition. That inspection costs a few $100s. What it can prevent is a repair bill 30 times larger. One more thing almost nobody checks. Pull the VIN and look for any open recall notices before the purchase. Several Sprinter model years have documented recall histories. Knowing whether your specific van has open recalls is free information. Not checking it is simply a choice. The right van does exist. We want to be direct about something before we close. The used campervan market is not broken. There are genuinely good vans in the listings, single-owner vehicles with clean documentation, professionally built conversions from established builders, honest sellers who have maintained their vans carefully and priced them fairly. Those vans exist, and buyers who find them can get real value from the used market. But buyers who apply that standard consistently will find something worth buying. Buyers who trust the photos and assume the asking price reflects the real condition will eventually become the scenario at the beginning of someone else's cautionary video. The listing shows you the cabinetry, it cannot show you what's behind it. It shows you the mileage, it cannot show you what that mileage cost the van. It shows you a price that looks reasonable. It cannot show you what reasonable means 18 months into ownership. The biggest mistake in the used campervan market isn't choosing the wrong platform. It's assuming that what's visible tells the whole story. It almost never does. That buyer we described at the start, financially careful, 2 years of research, 4 hours driven to see the van, wasn't careless. They just didn't know what to look for. Now you do. Tell us what you found. If you've bought a used campervan and discovered something after the sale that the seller never disclosed, tell us in the comments. What did you find, and what's the one thing you'd tell a buyer who's about to sign on a used van right now? Those comments protect other buyers, and they tell us exactly what to cover next.